As a prosecuting attorney, your skills transfer quite easily because crime is crime in all the states, in all the counties of Ohio. I've done murder cases, I've done drug trafficking. Drug trafficking is drug trafficking in every county in Ohio. All of that transfers. So what have I done here? I've taken the opportunity to follow the leading that God put on my heart at the request of some friends to come over here and run for this office. And if I'm successful, I will be an excellent prosecutor because I'm an excellent prosecutor now. What I'm going to do for Vinton County is try to help clean up the problems that it has and do that in concert with law enforcement.
I live in Hampden. I live on a farm. I have 4 horses, 4 goats, and that's what we do. When I go home on the weekends, I go home to Hampden. I love Vinton County. It's been my home, and irregardless of what happens on November 6th, I'll still be here. It'll still be my home. I'm only doing this because I believe Vinton County can be a better place. When I came here 15 years ago, I loved it here. My hometown is smaller than MacArthur. I grew up in a town with no traffic lights, no police department. Everybody says, why did you move to such a small place? It's bigger, actually. I have been involved in every community service organization in this county for many years. There haven't been too many that I've missed. Once I had Sydney, I tapered back some of my community service, but most of you know I still go strong. I believe in Vinton County. I believe in all that we can do together, and that's why I want to represent you as your attorney in public service. Over the years, I've represented many of you, and I've loved it. I just desire at this point to take a different path, and that's to serve you publicly as opposed to serving you privately. I look forward to what all we can do together, continue to do together, and I appreciate your support in November.
When I started as a prosecuting attorney in Athens County, I was assigned to Children's Services, and I've had cases where I had a case where a 2-year-old had a spoon shoved down his throat by one of his parents, tore his esophagus. That child went to the permanent custody of the state. Those parents decided it would be a good thing to have more children. So as they had more children, the agency workers went to the hospital and actually did removals from the hospital. So I've been on the prosecutor who has actually taken children. Well, I didn't take them from the hospital, but children's services workers did. But prosecuted those cases and taken them from the hospital through the adjudication process to the permanent custody process. And then the only good thing about those cases is those children get adopted by loving families. And I always made it a point to make sure that I went to the adoption hearings as well. Because that way, sometimes I saw children who were horribly abused put into families where they were loved and nourished and cherished. And then sometimes those cases go up on appeal as well. And I've argued those appeals, I've written the briefs, had to argue in front of the appellate courts. And so I've got the experience all the way through the path that the prosecuting attorney would have to do in those cases.
As I said earlier, I've made my work a lot about children's services cases from somewhat of a different angle, more on the defense side. I have the good fortune of, after 3 years of representing a lady on the defense side, again, the mother, my client, after a 3-day permanent custody trial, I prevailed, and the child was returned to the parents. Not many of my colleagues have the privilege of saying they won a permanent custody case against the state of Ohio. Now, I understand that may not make you happy because, you know, arguably some mother got away with abusing her child. But the point is as a defense attorney, you don't always take your clients to raise. You don't always believe in what you do, but you're obligated to defend their constitutional rights. I see that role as the same for the prosecuting attorney. I'm there in a different function, a different capacity. But because I have not actually followed the prosecution through does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that I do not know the rules, that I do not know how to litigate cases. And in fact, I think it makes my experiences better because I know what defense attorneys are able to get away with. And I think by doing that, and by knowing that flip side of it, I think I'll be better prepared to be a better prosecutor.
Well, actually, I'll start earlier in my career because I'm a career prosecutor now, but it's not my first career. I was actually a computer systems analyst for 14 years. So if you want technology in the prosecutor's office, I'm the guy who folks come to. When they need computers upgraded, software upgraded, different software programs, they come to me and they ask me about it. Given my experience, I'm actually also the person in the office who trains junior prosecutors with typically under 5 years experience. I take them under my wing, take them to trial with me so that they can learn how to do felony jury trials, how to prepare a case for trial. Murder trials, yeah, it's all the same rules. It's not all the same information or evidence. There's currently a case where there's a 4-year-old little girl who's the victim. And looking at the autopsy photos where they have the cut, they actually harvested her organs. Getting those cases ready for trial, when one of the assistants is a new mom, it's kind of tough because she has all the emotions to have to overcome. But I started off with the experience as this computer systems program. Well, I was also in private practice for 5 years, so I have all that experience. I mean, went up against children's services, all those things. But with the experience as a prosecutor, it's something that you cannot purchase and you cannot pay for. Because as a prosecutor, you have to go and you have to talk to the victims. When I talked to the murder victim's mother and told her, we're going to do what we can to help you out. We're going to do what we can to get these people in prison for the rest of their lives, because that's what the right thing to do was. When you're in court and you look at the murderers in the eye, and they're looking at you, trying to stare you down, trying to intimidate you, and you say, you're not going to intimidate me. That's something, again, that you can't purchase. Something you have to experience. For the drug traffickers, when you go to those cases, and you have law enforcement come to you and say, you know what, we have a drug trafficking case and an extortion case. And they write the search warrant, and all they do is they talk about the drug trafficking case. And you tell them, you know, what you have to do is you have to add the extortion in there too, or else the search warrant may not work. So it's the experience of this day-to-day working with law enforcement, hand in hand, being called to the scenes of crime. So if there's a murder or a serious crime, I ask law enforcement to do that, because when I walk the scene and I go to trial and I say, right here there was blood spatter from where this gentleman who was stabbed 50 times by his son breathed his last, and he expired his blood with his breath. Those are things that you cannot buy, that you need the experience as a prosecutor to be able to know how to do it, know how to present it in a way that's effective, efficient, and in a manner that people can understand. I have that experience through numerous jury trials and through numerous times in training younger prosecutors.
I wasn't aware that I was trying to buy anything. I thought I was here tonight to earn your vote, if I haven't already in the last 15 years. I learned a very important lesson when I first started practicing law, and I have never forgotten it. I decided to take on an adoption, a contested adoption case for a young family. The father was out of the picture, and the new stepfather wanted to adopt. I was a young attorney. I had never done a contested adoption before. I took it on, I did the work, I did the research, I go to court. They have an attorney that's been practicing as long as I've been alive at that point. He had a suit that cost 3 times as much as mine. His shoes were a lot shinier than mine. And what I learned from that experience after prevailing at trial was that it's about the work. It's about the hard work. It's not about who has more education. It's not about who has more experience. It's not about the shinier shoes, the nicer office. It's about who will do the work. And after 15 years here of working many days and many nights to accomplish the objectives of my clients and to complete the community service work that I've done, you have to rest assured that I will do the work and I will prevail. I am hugely aware of the resource issues in this county. I've operated under those constraints for 15 years. We are not made of money. It doesn't grow on trees, and Mike really doesn't have that printing press. So I'm aware of the cost. The cost of litigation is tremendous, whether it's civil litigation, it's children's services litigation, criminal litigation, the cost can be tremendous. I do not think that the cost of a case should be the determining factor, period. That does not mean that other factors aren't as important or should not be considered. A lot of time in cases, you have unavailable victims. You have victims who take off on you. You have witnesses who take off on you. There are reasons that cases should be and must be plea bargained, in my opinion. On last Wednesday's docket, I believe there were 153 charges in Hocking County. Hocking County is slightly bigger than Vinton County, but nonetheless, the number of cases is tremendous for even Hocking County. 153 people could not be sent to jail that day. We don't have bed space for 153 people that day. It can't happen. If the goal of the prosecutor is to only send people to jail, we do not have enough space. I fully agree that there are a lot more people who should be in jail than who are. I understand that. But I do unfortunately feel that plea bargaining has its place in the criminal justice system. Again, I think the facts of every case should be taken into consideration, the level of the crime, the amount of the evidence, the likelihood of prevailing at trial, all of those things, but I do not believe cost should be a determining factor.
With regard to that case, I think there's a misconception as to what plea bargaining is. Because when I get a case, getting it ready for grand jury, one of the things I do is I look at the case, I look at the strength of the evidence, and what I do on the, we have file folders, what I do on the jacket is I write down what I think an appropriate sentence for the defendant is. This is before I know his name, his race, or any of that information, because I don't care about any of that stuff. And so what I do is I write on the jacket, here's what I think an appropriate resolution is. And when I make that recommendation, I actually call law enforcement up front. And I say, what do you guys want out of this case? Because you're going to know this individual probably better than I do. You may know his history better than I do because you deal with them on a daily basis. You may have not come before the courts before. And so what I do is I write down what I think an appropriate resolution is. And I give that to the defense attorney right at the outset. So he knows, okay, this is what Driscoll thinks is appropriate. It may be a case where I think this client should be put on a treatment program instead of being convicted of a felony. He comes in, he pleads guilty, he's put on treatment. Typically, it's if it's his first drug offense, he can be put on treatment. So I don't think everybody should go to jail. I think drug traffickers should go to prison, because that's where they belong. And so there is a place for negotiated resolutions, plea bargaining, but it's from a position of strength, not of weakness. And you do have to look at all of the different aspects with regard to it. You do have to look at, if you have a domestic case and they fall back in love, because that happens quite a bit, you're going to have a hard time prosecuting that case. But if you can get the person to take a negotiated resolution of that matter, that's probably a good thing. Because that way, if they mess up again, then it's a whole lot easier to deal with them. And so plea bargaining has its place. Would I let money get in the way? No. Because my job is to do justice. It's not to get convictions. It's not to put everybody in jail or everybody in prison. If there's a case that's brought to me and I look at it and I say, you know what, there's just not enough evidence to support this case, I'll send a letter back to law enforcement and let them know that. And say, get me this information, and then we'll take the case. And so there's a whole spectrum of information that you need to be able to make those decisions. But money should not come in.